Okay, welcome everyone back to another episode of Pats and Covered. I'm joined here by Victoria GREMPEL, and I am very excited about this episode because this is the kind of person and the careers I really wanted to get involved onto the podcast of like really, really untraditional and cool careers. So, Victoria, do you want to come in and do a little introduction for yourself? I won't take over the glory of it all.
Oh, you're too kind. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm thrilled to be here. So I guess a little bit about myself. My name is Victoria GREMPEL. I work in sales development for an artificial intelligence company called Sama. But I guess sort of my plot twist, the reason that I'm on this show is I'm actually a retired ballet dancer.
And I literally, so for like anyone who doesn't know, so me and Victoria literally met yesterday, which was amazing. And it was on a panel at a VR event, and we were in the virtual reality environment. It was so cool, but so different. I was just like the whole time so confused by everything that was happening, but it was really, really cool to be able to do it. And she kind of just threw that in there where she's like, yeah, like I was a classically trained ballerina at Juilliard. And I was just like, excuse me, no. Like you can't just glaze over this. What is going on? So, and this is where tech community comes into my heart, where it's like, right, so easy and fun to be able to meet all these other people with really cool things and stuff happening, and then turn around and have a quick conversation with them afterwards.
Yeah, no, it was actually so cool how you and I met. So I guess I'll say a little bit about how we met last night.
Yeah.
So we were on this panel, and it was a bunch of women who come from, I guess, what you could consider like non-traditional tech backgrounds, or like, I guess, women that don't have a degree in STEM. And we did the whole thing in AltSpace VR. So like, I was in my Oculus, in my living room. It was evening, and certainly it was like morning time in Australia where you're based. And we had this great turnout, and a number of people were there. And of course, everyone's there like as their avatar. And so I've actually kind of loved meeting people that way. I feel like if it weren't for, the pandemic, it almost gave us a new way to meet people. Anyway, that's what I'll say about that.
I mean, great. Like the pandemic essentially made these kind of things happen a lot more easily, right? I mean, I think before lockdown, things like this, like a podcast like this, would have been a lot harder to convince people to get onto in terms of like, hey, join me for a video call where we chat through things. They're like, nah, I'm all right. Like,
yeah.
But I'm very glad it's all happened. And I'm very glad we got to meet, because also now I've got like a whole lineup of new guests coming along just because of that the panel we did yesterday. So it's great. It worked out really well for me. But anyway, right. Classically trained ballerina, right? Let's go back. Wait, I'm assuming you started really, really young when you got into ballerina. Like, how was that something you kind of just knew what to do? I'm sure you didn't really know you wanted to do it for, but you kind of got into it, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I started dancing when I was like 2 or 3 years old, as I feel like many little girls get into. And I fell in love with it. I started my dance and ballet career and my figure skating career at the same time. So I was a competitive dancer and figure skater. And when I got to, the ripe old age of 9, I actually had to decide if I wanted to do the dance track or the figure skating track, because that's at the time if you have to decide if you want to train for the Olympics as a figure skater. Basically, you make that decision at 9.
Wow.
And so, I was on track for that, but I ended up liking dance a little bit more. And so ever since then, I'd been dancing since I was 2 years old.
That is amazing. So, oh my God, at 9 you decided like, right, okay, dancing is where I want to be at. Mm-hmm. Also figure skating, another little twist, which I'm all about. Like, I think I did that as like a kid as well, growing up. And it's just, God, it's such a like pushed away memory at this stage in my life where I'm like, oh my God, I did do that at some stage. Bizarre. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
So wow, okay, so you've now gone into dancing at 9. So like, was that then just like throughout high school, throughout kind of making the college decisions, that was just it?
Yeah. So 9, I retired, as you could say, from figure skating, and I went full force really into dance. I should say I'm based in New York City. I was born just outside of Manhattan in a small suburb. And when I got to probably around age 10 or so, I had outgrown the local dance schools in my area. And a teacher of mine told my mother, I think she's ready to train in in the big city in New York. And so basically at the ripe old age of 10, My parents started driving me an hour into Manhattan for more serious technical training in dance. And so by the time I had reached, I was about in 8th grade, I actually attended a specialized high school in Manhattan called Professional Children's School for children who were pursuing professional careers, whether that was in dance or children that were on Broadway or in television shows or models or equestrians. I had a friend that competed in the 2016 Olympics, she's a horseback rider. And so I was going to like normal academic school there. And then I would, leave school around 2:30 or so. And then I'd be in ballet class, basically training from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And then I would go home. The crazy thing about that is since I lived outside of Manhattan, I was actually waking up at 4:45 every morning to catch a 6:13 commuter train to make it to my first period chemistry class by 8:15. And I did all of that to support and enhance my ballet training until I graduated high school.
So I'm kind of a little bit lost for words. Oh my God. As in, I mean that in the best sense of the words. That is amazing. Like the kind of dedication you had from the kind of get-go for this. You're like, this is it. This is really what I want. And also the school sounds unreal. I feel like you've got great, especially the Olympics. Oh my God, it's just so cool. It's just so much in there. I'm like, oh my God, unbelievably cool. So right. Oh my God. This also, by the way, this sounds very much like a Step Up movie in my head right now. I don't know if anyone else has compared it to that, but I love this.
It's funny. And yeah, it's funny. So that whole waking up at 4:45 in the morning, and then by the time, high school student taking these advanced courses and things, I wouldn't go to bed until midnight. So that's why now as an adult working a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 6 job is cake. I'm like, bring it on. This is great. I have, 10 hours or something or 7 hours after work that I could still be productive.
Yeah, as in I was literally talking about this the other day with a friend where I think in college we just got so used to, I definitely got used to having ridiculous hours of days where I think my body just got used to the 6 hours of sleep and I just couldn't sleep any longer than that. Napping was just out of the world at that stage. And then I started working and I was like, don't kick me out of work at 5. What am I meant to do when I go home?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
I've got 6 raw hours that I could be productive. Yeah.
It's and also, I'd moved to Melbourne and stuff, and it was like, I don't have anything to do. I don't have friends. I don't have nothing here. Why are you doing this to me? But anyway, I feel like I've talked about this before in the podcast and stuff, so I won't bore people with it. But okay, cool. And then Juilliard. Oh my God, I feel like the pinnacle of kind of performance arts, right?
Yeah, I always say that I was just as surprised as everybody that I tell this story to. So, after training for many years, went through high school, I was always very into academics and I thought, a more traditional university path was something that I was interested in. But, I auditioned for Juilliard with the attitude of okay, what if I got to lose? Who actually gets into Juilliard? It was sort of I had skipped out. I skipped out on another audition, another dance program at another university, and my mother was like, Victoria, I've paid $30 for your Juilliard audition and you can't skip out on another audition. You have to go. And I was like, okay, this is a long shot, but let me go. So I went into the audition not super nervous, and it was actually funny. So Juilliard is actually right in the same neighborhood as where I went to high school on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. So I think I went to my first period math class that day and then casually strolled over to the Juilliard audition because I was like, there's no way I'm getting in. Lo and behold, after about, I think it was a 6.5-hour day. So it's kind of is in those dance movies where there's a first round of a ballet class and you have your number on and then there's a cut. There's another class and there's a cut and people are crying and storming out of rooms. And I kind of sat there and I couldn't believe that I made it to the end of the day. And just because you get to the end of the day, it doesn't mean that you get in. It just means that you're in the running. So I made it to the end of the day. Fast forward a couple weeks later, it was the week of my 18th birthday. I'm sitting in the library at my high school, the Professional Children's School. And so, because, going to school in the city, I'm in a tall building looking out the 8th floor the library, and I just happened to be looking across at Lincoln Center at Juilliard, and I get a call, and they're like, Victoria, we want to welcome you to Juilliard's class of 2016. And my initial reaction was like, am I being punked? Like, where's Ashton? Like, this can't be real. And then basically the rest is history.
Oh, I love that. I think honestly, I mean, you say you were just as, I'm like, I wasn't too surprised. Like, I mean, the dedication you've had like throughout everything else, I was just like, honestly, you deserve this. Makes sense to me from what I'm hearing. I'm like, completely well deserved. But like, oh, unreal. I'm loving this, by the way, if you couldn't tell. I'm like, this is just so different to everything I've ever talked about with like other people on the set. I'm like, amazing. But okay, cool. So Juilliard's happening. I mean, how long is the degree? 4 years, I'm assuming?
Yeah, so you graduate with a Bachelor of Fine Arts. And you get to perform. So Juilliard is part of Lincoln Center. So within Lincoln Center, that's home to the Metropolitan Opera House. New York City Ballet is there, American Ballet Theater. So you're basically performing on all of these stages, like in the hub, the cultural hub of New York. And so I did that for 4 years, had these wonderful experiences. I mean, training and performing with luminaries. You know, I had a teacher that, for all of you, modern dance nerds out there, was a disciple of Martha Graham. One of my favorite ballet dancers from American Ballet Theater. He's now retired, but he was a principal dancer. Sasha Radetsky choreographed my senior solo, and I was in an Under Armour commercial with Misty Copeland, like the first Black ballerina at American Ballet Theater. And so I just had all of these wonderful experiences. Some of my performances were reported on by the Times, and it was just like every day was just sort of this wild out of body experience.
Oh, that just sounds unreal. Like, I'm like, I feel like we could spend the whole time just talking about your experience with the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, so I'm assuming you've graduated 2020, so that sounds about right. Like last year.
No. So I graduated in 2016.
Oh, sorry. I heard that as like you started. That makes sense. Okay, I was like, wow, that was just so recent.
Yeah.
Into the pandemic we go. No, okay, cool. So you graduated in 2016. Okay, that gives us a lot more time to cover up in that sense of things.
Yeah.
So what was next? I mean, did you then start working as a ballerina? Like, what actually happened after?
So I was performing, and when you're in Juilliard, even though it's in school, you're treated as a professional. So all of your performances are like open to the public. So it's like listed online. So you're basically performing professionally. Behind the scenes, basically, while I was a student, I started working in Juilliard's Office of the President, and in their fundraising offices, because I became obsessed with Juilliard. Just like, how does it run? Like, how does it, over 100+ year old institution run? How does it, I want to know like the business side of it. And so I was doing that all while I was going to school, like my 30-minute lunch breaks and things like that. So by the time I graduated, a position was created for me on Juilliard's public affairs team. And I say that I like tricked my boss into giving me a job, because I said, if marketing, and communications is about telling the story of Juilliard, then who better to tell the story than somebody who lived it? And that's how I joke that's how I like tricked them into giving me a position there.
But that sounds great. I mean, like, that's literally, I feel like, how everyone should approach jobs at this stage. Like, no, you need me to be able to do this because of this. Like, this is how it works.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you've been working in the professional affairs office, the public affairs. God, words are just not my forte at 9 a.m. in the morning. But so public affairs office. So I mean, you've now had this amazingly cool career working in the arts and dancing and public affairs. But then where has the switch to tech happened? Like, has that happened yet, or is that to come? Where does that all fit in?
So the switch to tech happened right smack dab in the middle of the pandemic. I think not unlike many other people, I found myself at home in front of a computer, sort of isolated from my normal life. And I just had a lot of time to think. And I had a lot of time to think about the future, my career, just reading a lot. And, tech, certainly during the pandemic, was creeping into everybody's lives, and in a way that it wasn't before. And certainly in the arts, I think it's new, because so much of the arts are in person. So I was interested in exploring, new ways to connect. And it's funny, I was actually reading an article because I started, reading more about AI, and I was really fascinated by this, right? And all of the wonderful, powerful, insane things that, AI is responsible for. And, I actually read this article about, and I think it's an article a lot of like tech people will be familiar with, how an image of Obama was like fed into like an AI, and it was upscaled to an image of a white man. And so I read about how, the problem there was that the data set was not diverse. Like the algorithm had only been trained on images of like predominantly white men. And that got me thinking, wow, this is a problem. I think this is like an obvious problem. And so that kind of like flipped a switch in my brain. And I was like, wow, and if AI is going to take over our lives and tech is taking over our lives, there needs to be people of diverse backgrounds working in it to make sure that the AI is equitable or is made for everybody. And so I kind of threw my hat in the ring. I was like, all right, how do I get into tech? Like, this is knowing everything that I know now. How can I get into tech? And I basically stumbled upon this like lovely, incredible, amazing training program. It was literally like, I Googled how to get into tech sales. Like that was the Google search. I was temporarily living at my parents' house, how to get into tech sales. This program came up. It was called Vendition. It was like, we'll train you for free. We'll set you up with an apprenticeship. And then if all works out, you'll stay on as a full-time employee. And I said, what do I have to lose?
Yeah.
And so I interviewed there. It was great. One of the first places I interviewed with after my training was at Sama. And Sama, where I currently work, is a female-founded, female-led ethical AI data annotation company.
Oh, wow. I love this. This is like all the greatest stuff in one place for me, honestly, because the diversity and everything about it, I'm just like, I could scream from the rooftops and die on that hill. Like, honestly, that is like, I live for this. Okay, cool. So let's break this down into little smaller bits.
Yeah. Sorry.
What made the decision? No, this is perfect. This is like, we needed the highlight. Like, let's go into deeper ends, right? So what made you decide specifically? So, I mean, you've already explained why AI. Why specifically, say, tech sales? And not necessarily going straight into kind of hardcore data sciencing or coding and all those kind of things.
I thought I sort of took an assessment of my current skills and experiences. And, I think going back to school is amazing if you could do it, but I wasn't in the position to sort of like drop everything and go back to school. And I think with everything that everything that encompasses going back to school. And I said, okay, how can I take my current skill set, add some more training, do some research, do some homework, and how can I apply that into tech? And so I looked at my resume and I said, okay, I think tech sales could be an interesting entry point. I'm willing to learn. Certainly there's hope. You can't just like jump into, like selling AI like I am now. So it took some research and homework, but I said, you know what, I love talking to people. I love solving problems, like identifying a problem and helping to solve it. And the fact that I found a company that, like I said, had amazing leadership and I loved the work that they were doing, felt right. And my background, marketing, about telling a story, and I was doing fundraising, like shaking hands and attending orchestra performances with donors and, bringing them into the fold at Juilliard. So I felt that there were a lot of transferable skills. And then also, of course, being a dancer and like the intensity and the time management and that sort of like relentlessness, I think, is required in sales to not be defeated or like be good with like rejection if someone says no, like how you handle those. And so that's how I found my way. That was my entry point with like the skill set I had at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, you've set this up perfectly. This leads into a great question. So, and I find this a lot when I talk to, we run Women in Code here in Melbourne, and there's a lot of people who come in and they're like, hey, I'm taking a switch in careers, and they have this worry of kind of not being able to get a job just because they don't have skills in that specific industry, right? But I think we both talked about transferable skills even on the panel yesterday, but it's just such a key important point of it. Did you ever, I mean, from the sounds of Sama, it sounds great. So I feel like it probably wasn't the biggest kind of hurdle to get past and that side of things. But Was that a kind of a running theme of, but you're a dancer, why are you in tech, or why are you doing AI? Where people just didn't understand that any skills you've learned are always going to be transferable?
It's an interesting question. Like I said, like jumping into Sama as my first job. I remember my first meeting, and like entry level, like sales development representative, that's my title. And I'm in this big meeting with like the head of product and the CEO, and it's my first day, and I'm sitting there in Zoom, and they're like, "Aren't you the woman from Juilliard?" And I was just, honestly, I was floored. Like I was just trying to be like blend into the furniture, just trying to adapt. And so I think you'd be surprised, and people who feel that way, because I certainly felt that way, like, why is my experience valuable in any way? Because it seems so out of left field. But in tech and in AI, my experience has been that it's almost attractive to tech companies for you to have an unusual background, because then you bring a different perspective to the field. And so I can't say that was huge. I think my biggest critic was myself. In that way, I think, like you're your own worst enemy sometimes. At Sama, I currently work in the autonomous vehicle and robotics industry, which is like pretty much like very male dominated outside of Sama. And so I think I felt a little hesitation, like going in and like attending events or networking in those groups. But again, I feel like once you start talking to somebody and they realize that you know what you're talking about, you sort of break down that barrier and gain their respect in that way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I think it's so important. And the Gretchen, who I run Women Who Code with, she constantly is like always talking about how it doesn't matter. Like I mean, if you ever, anyone listening, ever need kind of a backup of like, hey, you've got the skills for tech, it doesn't matter what you've been doing. She's the person to talk to. Like she can convince. And she's like, you did this. Well, you learned X, Y, Z from this. Like your mother, like, oh my God, the best negotiator in the world. Like it's just so amazing to hear those kind of things. Like she's great at it. And it does really just come back down to yourself, right? I mean, it's such a big thing of like, the amount of times I still remember this. So I mean, I was in a similar position where I kind of started as a data scientist with no like tech background. Like I was like, I'll learn how to code on the job. This will be great. So when I started, I kept just being like, well, I don't know anything. Like, I mean, I don't know anything. And it took me, God, 8 months. And I was at a hackathon kind of an event where we were just learning about this new tech that had come out. And I was on this team of like, it was just like random industry people. And these are all people who'd been in the industry for years. Like these are like senior people. And I'm just there as the grad back then, like who joined this team. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to let the team down. And I remember so distinctly kind of we being there and we're going through the thing and they're like, oh, okay, what like language do people code in so we can actually go do this product, blah, 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 this project. And everyone had their one thing. And I was just like, honestly, there's like 4 languages in this. Pick whatever I can do. I'll switch. It'll be fine. And it was like that moment of like, oh my God, I actually do know things. And it took 8 months. Like, I mean, I'd been obviously working and like things were going fine, but it took so long for me to be able to see it until I was in a situation where I was like, oh, I do know things. Oh, I can actually apply my skills here and it'll be fine. It's just super interesting, I think, how quickly that it's just a 1 second switch and you're like, yeah, I'm okay now. This makes sense. I think the next, sorry, I just kind of wanted to hear more about Sama itself. Like, sorry, it just sounds like really cool stuff. And I'm sure other people who are listening, especially because I'm into data science and more people are, would be interested to hear that too.
Yeah. So at Sama, we provide high quality training data. So we do data labeling, and some of our customers that we can mention, of course, include, some of our favorite companies, Google and Microsoft. And I work with Ford and so basically what we do, and we're considered an ethical AI company. And I love to like break that down for a minute. So basically, I don't know how, I'm sure your listeners are very familiar with many parts of the AI and ML and workflow and how that all works. So basically, we work on a number of like computer vision projects. And so we have full-time annotators who annotate data. And so what makes us an ethical AI company has to do with our supply chain. So basically, let's say we get, 1 million images from Google or something, and they need them annotated, or like a Ford company or something. So what happens then is that data gets sent to our employees in East Africa. And in East Africa, that was a special place for our late founder, Lila Jana. She actually started Sama as a nonprofit. She has this amazing TED Talk. You should totally check it out. And her philosophy was giving work. So that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And so she had a connection to East Africa, and she said, you know what, there are tons of people here who are willing to work and who are skilled, and how can we empower them? And so that sort of like blossomed into what it is now. So basically we have over 3,000 full-time employees, where basically we support like entire economies. So we're in Nairobi, we're in Gulu, we're opening another center actually in India as well, where people are given benefits, a living wage, training, and they stay with us for a number of years. And so those are the folks that are doing those data annotations. And of course, the data is labeled at an extremely high quality, over, I can go into the whole sales pitch of over 98% efficiency and all of that. And then it gets sent back. And then of course, we don't hold on to that data at all. It's all anonymized, and then it gets sent back to our customers, and then they use that labeled data, in their algorithms. And so, like I said, working on everything from self-driving projects, which are super cool, the future, to biotech companies, like robots doing surgery. And then we have our labelers sort of like annotating X-rays or MRIs or things like that, so we can build better, more efficient robots. Well, not us, but our clients, and things like that. And so that's a little bit about Sama, and our CEO Wendy Gonzalez is a strong, powerful woman, and I love that as well. And I look up to her, and she's great. She's like one of those CEOs. It's a pretty big company, and she'll like pop into like the community happy hour, and we're like, oh, hey Wendy, what's up? So it's a great community, and I love waking up and logging on to Zoom every morning to work with the team.
Oh my God, that is honestly the best story you could also, I mean, it makes sense. You're in tech sales, you should be able to have a very good story pitch here going. So I'm very glad I asked that question, to be honest. And it's just, I'm so glad there is work like this being done, especially the whole equitable part of it, the opportunities and stuff you're providing, but also the fact that models are getting better training data sets. And it's so important, because I mean, like the running joke at the moment is always just like, a data scientist's job is just wrangling the data or cleaning up the data. Like 70% of that is the job. But I mean, there's only so much one individual can do when they're cleaning out the data. Like I might notice, I'm like, oh, there's not enough women in this, or it's not enough people of color, but I'm not going to notice every single bias that might exist in the data set. So this is so cool that there is work being done to kind of prevent and move this forward. Oh my God, amazing. Right, okay, so you've had like a really cool careers. I mean, is going more technical still kind of an idea that you have? Because you did mention that you wanted to get into tech sales, it's kind of an entry path. Is that still a thing? Or hey, you found kind of your niche place and you really enjoy where you're at? What is next, do you think, for yourself? And also, you don't have to like tie yourself into anything, just out of interest.
Yeah. You know what? I got a piece of advice that I've kind of stuck to, and life is this crazy, wild ride, and you really just have to keep your mind open to everything. Like if you told me even like 9 months ago, 10 months ago that I was going to be doing what I'm doing now, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But now that I have this love for ethical AI and tech, I definitely want to continue down this path. And Sama has been incredible and like supporting too, like, what do you want to do next, Victoria? How can we help you grow? Which is very exciting. And even on the side, like how you and I met, like I'm super interested in like how we can connect more people with tech, like getting more, and especially like women, I'm passionate about this, like into the space and not be intimidated. So like I'd love to continue, wherever tech sales takes me, or this is what I'm doing now, but figuring out ways to bring more people, so there's less intimidation. Like I want it to be friendlier, or at least, I mean, you and I know it's friendly because we work in tech, but from the outside. So
Yeah.
whether that's, playing around in VR, like I think there's like some great future there of how to connect people. And so I'd love to explore that space, but yeah, tech will be the future for me. And I'm excited to learn and grow and keep my mind open to all the different opportunities.
I absolutely love that. And I think I said this in one of the past episodes, and the only reason it's come back is because my mom was listening to it last night, and she came home and she's like, I really liked this thing you said. And I was like, oh, Mom, you're actually listening to this. What a whole new world. But it was kind of similar in that, like, I mean, I was saying along how, like, literally every single day I'll make 100 different decisions, and those 100 different decisions end up putting me into a different thing altogether. Like, I might, like, talk about ethics today. Like, I'm like, and I did another thing with someone else called Saba Semeni. I literally can't remember her second name off the top of my head, but she's in New Zealand. She's very into data ethics, and just listening to her talk was unreal. And I'm like, this is actually really interesting to me. And I'm like, this is something I want to keep going towards a little bit more in the future. Not at the moment, but like definitely like very important to me.
Yeah.
But hey, I'm sorry, 3 years ago, I never saw myself in tech. I wouldn't have seen myself going into data ethics necessarily, but like every decision is so different that like literally you never know what you're going to be doing in the next couple of years, let alone like 5 years or 10 years time anyway. But anyway, I will leave that whole box alone, to be honest, because that's a whole spiral in and of itself. But so I mean, I'm so glad that you came and talked to me about all this kind of stuff, because it's just been, and I think it does sound very kind of disjointed for some people, where it's like, oh, you did this and then you did this and then you did this, and it's all very different things. But to me, it sounds very fluid in terms of one thing led to the other, which you got your skills and you learned different parts of things from every different part. Now you're employing whatever you need and whatever suits yourself to kind of keep going.
Yeah, it's been it's funny that you're like, it sounds disjointed, and like sometimes I feel like it sounds disjointed, but then I sort of have to like talk myself off the ledge a little bit. And I'm like, I was on like 3 different client calls today, and each one of them, it was a performance.
Yeah.
It was like, instead of rehearsing, I was just, I became very good friends with our director of like sales engineering, and I'm like, all right, let's teach me what I need to know for this. So similar to like a rehearsal and a performance, it's the same thing with getting on calls with data scientists, because you're the people that I spend my day chatting with and talking to, and helping make sure that you have ethically sourced data that's non-biased. So
that's honestly an ideal place to wrap this up on. I am so thankful for you to jump onto this, especially kind of on like, hey, we met today, do you want to do a podcast tomorrow? It was a very kind of like organically very quick turnaround, which I'm super excited and glad for, to be honest. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, because I know it is the evening out in New York, so very thankful for it.
No, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Yeah, it's amazing. Again, connecting people through tech. I mean, we're doing that right now across the
Exactly.
world.
And I'm sure there'll be people listening who might have been ballerinas, because I'm like, you never know who's listening, and they might end up doing tech sales or AI or whatever else in the whole world. There's so many different things you can do with tech. So I'm very glad you came along, and we will leave it off at that. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks with another episode. But thank you so much for your time today, Victoria.
Thank you so much.
So that was Victoria GREMPEL, and I am still in awe of how her life is essentially a dance movie, but with the added on ending of her career changing into ethical AI. I think it's so great for her to highlight how she decided she wanted in on the AI world, and then actually leveraging the existing skills that she already had to find the perfect job that would suit her. I'm really excited to see what the future holds for Victoria, especially in the equitable and ethical AI world that she's in, and maybe even getting to meet her in person at some stage over the next year or two. We'll be back with another episode of Paths Uncovered in 2 weeks' time, and we'll see you then.